You walk into a store, and the clerk charges you double just because of the shoes you're wearing. For centuries, that wasn't a scam, it was the law of the land. The seller studies the first customer, expensive coat, unfamiliar accent, a hurried expression that says he needs the cloth today. The seller names a price. 5 minutes later, a local customer asks for the same thing. She knows the market, knows the seller, and is perfectly willing to walk away. She argues, waits, and eventually pays less. Today, that might feel dishonest. But for much of commercial history, it could simply feel like shopping. So why did every store on earth suddenly stop haggling and start using the one thing sellers used to hate, the price tag? Walk into a modern store and pick up a shirt marked $20. That tiny label carries several assumptions you probably never think about. The customer behind you will probably see the same $20. The cashier is not supposed to invent a higher price because your clothes look expensive. You do not need to prove that you're a skilled negotiator. And you can put the shirt back without feeling like you just lost an argument. A price tag looks like a small piece of information. But it carries a much bigger promise. The seller is not supposed to create a new price after looking at you. That promise was not always the normal rule of retail. But the alternative was not pure chaos either. Markets have long included a mix of bargaining, customary prices, posted prices, credit arrangements, and standard rates. Even before the American Civil War, some country stores used standard prices for many basic goods while still bargaining in other situations. The important difference is where the final price lives. In a negotiated sale, the price lives inside the interaction. The seller starts somewhere. The buyer pushes back. Both sides judge how badly the other person wants the deal. The final number may depend on supply, local custom, personal relationships, information, patience, confidence, and the ability to walk away. A skilled customer might enjoy this. Bargaining can feel like a game, and winning can feel satisfying. But the less experienced customer has a different problem. After leaving the shop, how do you know whether you paid a fair price? Maybe the customer before you paid less. Maybe the seller raised the price because you were a stranger. Maybe you misunderstood the quality of the goods. Maybe you negotiated successfully and still lost. The problem was not that bargaining always created a bad price. The problem was uncertainty. One price selling offered to end part of that uncertainty. It did not necessarily promise the cheapest price. It promised that the visible price would not normally be renegotiated for every individual customer. That idea could be presented as a moral rule. In the early 20th century, J.C. Penney built his stores around what he called the Golden Rule. His instructions emphasized treating customers alike, offering fair and honest value, and seeking fair payment rather than every dollar the market could possibly bear. Of course, a fixed price did not make every merchant honest. It did not make every product affordable. It did not erase inequality. Its promise was narrower. The price should not suddenly rise because you looked wealthy, unfamiliar, desperate, or simply bad at arguing. That promise helped customers trust the system. But trust was only half of the story. The greater transformation happened behind the counter. When the price existed only in the owner's memory, every sale required judgment. A clerk needed to know the approximate value of the goods, the lowest acceptable amount, whether discounts were allowed, how important the customer was, and how far the negotiation could go. Now imagine trying to run a huge store that way. Hundreds of employees. Thousands of products. Crowds of customers who had never met the owner. New workers who did not know every supplier, every customer, and every acceptable discount. A large store could not depend on every clerk becoming an expert negotiator. To survive, the price had to be ripped out of the seller's head and pinned to the wall. It moved onto a tag. Onto a shelf. Into a newspaper ad. Into a catalog. Onto a receipt. Eventually, into the cash register and the accounting system. This is the strange reason stores put prices on everything. The label was not merely information for the customer. It was an instruction for the entire store. Think about that, the price tag wasn't just a label. It was the operating system of the pre-computer world. It told the customer what the item cost. It told the clerk what to charge. It allowed ads to match the counter. It helped managers coordinate many departments. And it made the same rule easier to repeat across different employees and, eventually, different branches. The one-price policy was only one part of a larger retail machine. Money-back guarantees, cash registers, catalogs, advertising, standardized goods, and new management systems all mattered. As the 1800s drew to a close, the price tag became the engine of the modern store, working hand in hand with money-back guarantees to turn shopping into a predictable science. Then the customer's behavior changed too. In a small shop, many goods might remain behind the counter. You entered, explained what you wanted, and the seller presented it. Asking to see an item began a social interaction. Asking its price could begin a negotiation. Walking away might feel like rejecting the seller as much as rejecting the product. The department store weakened that pressure. Goods became easier to see and touch. Prices were already visible. Customers could walk through multiple departments, compare products, admire displays, and leave without buying anything. Between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, department stores increasingly combined one-price selling with accessible goods, tolerance for browsing, customer service, and easy returns. Stores such as Marshall Field grew into enormous retail spaces that encouraged customers to spend time enjoying shopping, not merely completing a purchase. Fixed prices did not invent browsing by themselves. But they helped separate browsing from buying. You no longer needed to ask a person for permission to discover whether you could afford something. You could examine 10 products without beginning 10 negotiations. You could enter the store without already knowing exactly what you wanted. That freedom was extremely useful to the store. A person who comes only to buy one requested item is predictable. A person who wanders may discover 5 things they never planned to buy. The price tag helped make the store feel less like a private conversation and more like a public environment. It allowed strangers to move through a commercial space using rules they could read for themselves. And once prices became repeatable, stores could grow larger without making every transaction personal again. But, one price for all was never as complete as it sounded. Coupons, memberships, sales, credit terms, bulk discounts, employee discounts, and geographic differences have always complicated the idea. 2 people may see the same shelf label and still pay different total costs. A fixed price can also be unfair, manipulative, or simply too high. The price tag did not make shopping perfectly fair. It made the rule more visible. And visibility matters, because a visible rule can be compared, questioned, remembered, and challenged. For generations, the physical price tag appeared to settle a simple question. What does this product cost? For a century, the price tag was our shield. But as shopping moved onto screens, that silent contract began to dissolve. Today, the promise of one price for all is dying in the dark. But now, the curtain is being pulled back on a new, invisible force, surveillance pricing. Behind the scenes, pricing middlemen are now tracking everything, your location, your history, even the way your mouse shivers over a button, quietly tilting the scales against you. While this tech is still emerging, the shift is undeniable. The fixed price is no longer a solid wall, it's becoming a liquid that changes shape depending on who is looking at it. But this digital shift does more than change the math, it breaks the century-old promise of the price tag. A paper label says, "This is the price of the product." A data-driven system can ask a different question. What price or offer should this particular person see, at this particular moment, through this particular device? The seller may no longer be standing behind the counter, studying your coat and listening to your accent. The seller is now a silent algorithm, a ghost in the machine that doesn't just watch what you buy, but measures the exact moment your resolve begins to break. This isn't the fair fight of the old marketplace. You can't argue with an algorithm, you can only be measured by it. Instead, the relationship has become a one-sided interrogation of your data, where the seller knows you, but you can't talk back. The public visibility of a fixed price was the consumer's only real leverage. It turned a private trap into a public fact, a fact that is now being erased. The price tag once brought the terms of the deal into the light. But now the lights are going out, and you won't even know you're losing.